All right, guys. I know we're all getting tired, but this is really where all of just like in any sporting event, if it's a good sporting event, it's all going to come down to the end. That's where everything is decided. Everything's decided in the last quarter, the last few minutes of the game, because that's when those who persist put everything together and they put together what it takes to win. Right? And that's what we're going to do here. For most of the next couple of lectures, what we're going to do is it's just going to be a review. And it's just going to be an extensive review that goes over everything together. And we try and put each little piece into where it belongs to do what we're trying to do. So the first one we're going to do is we're going to build the perfect strength athlete. I'm going to help you go through how do we build that strength athlete so that the best strength athlete that you can have. All right. So by the end of this lecture, you should be able to write the equation for calculating power, state the physiological basis underlying each component of power. So what goes into power? What is it about muscle, connective tissue, the brain, all of these different components that go into power? Describe the relationship between hypertrophy and power. So do you need a big muscle to be powerful, or can you have a small, powerful muscle as well? Explain how we can use nutrition to improve muscle mass. You guys already know that. Give examples of neural components of strength. So you should be able to say, here's an example of how we know that we're learning something and that's making us stronger. You should be able to describe the optimal training for velocity. How do you train to improve the velocity component or the rate of force development component of the power equation? You should be able to provide an example of a nutritional intervention to improve velocity and explain consequences of training only to improve power. All right, so you know all of this stuff. But we're going to start again with this simple thing, which is the components of power. So strength, speed, and power are the three things that we're really looking at as far as the components of what's really going to go into fitness. You're going to also have endurance components in there as well. But really, what we're looking for a performance measure, one of the better performance measures is power. And what power is, it's force times velocity. So as far as we're concerned, it's the force that the muscle can produce and the rate at which it develops that force. So how quickly it can develop force. So velocity can also be looked at as rate of force development. Force is like your maximal isometric force. How much force can the muscle produce and how quickly can it produce that force? Because you might have some big oaf of an individual who can produce just boatloads of force. They can hold up the world essentially, but they develop that force really slowly because all they do is they do really heavy work. They do that, they don't really focus on the velocity component, and the result is that their power is actually moderate. They have good force but low velocity. You also get a lot of people who are really small and sinewy and they've got really good velocity, but their force is really crap. So there's two ways you can get power, and what we're going to learn is that the power component of it, the velocity, is actually such an important part of power. So you can be a weaker athlete but have much better velocity, and your power is actually going to be really, really good. All right, so what goes into these two components? Because really when we're talking about power, if we want to improve power, we don't necessarily train by trying to increase power directly. What we do is we train by increasing force, and we train by increasing velocity of the movement. So what goes into force? That's the muscle cross-sectional area, so how big the muscle is. And that's really what goes into the isometric force, because it doesn't matter how quickly we're going to develop this force. All we care about is where we get to. And that's a lot about how many sarcomeres we have in parallel, how much protein we can pack into those muscle fibers. The velocity component, now this velocity component has a learning component, which is neural. Can I turn on the right motor units at the right time to develop this huge power? And the other component is the ability to transmit the force. So do I have stiff connective tissues within the muscle, within the tendon, that are going to allow me to transmit the force that I'm producing in the muscle to the tendons to produce that movement that's going to give me that power? All right? So then what we're going to do is we're going to first look at how we're going to increase muscle cross-sectional area, and we're going to look at how we're going to increase these other components of learning and neural components. So the first thing is muscle cross-sectional area, the force component. What you have to do if you want to build this, you have to be in a positive protein balance. That means that your protein synthesis is greater than your degradation. So again, we go back to that example of your bank account. What you've got is you've got your salary coming in, you've got all of these inputs of money, and that's going to be positive for your bank balance. And then you've got all your outflows, all of the things you're spending money on, all of those little things that add up. And if those little things add up to more than what you're taking in, you're in a deficit. Okay? And the same is true for your muscle. If the little things add up and the degradation is higher than the synthesis, your muscle is going to get smaller. If your synthesis is greater than degradation, your muscle is going to get bigger. So what are the things that are going to drive us to go forward? Resistance exercise and nutrition. And really, it's about getting these two things right, and that's going to grow our muscles, and that's going to be one component of increasing our power.